set-aside money. For set-aside money, you're always creating a new study section to determine who's going to get that money. But in terms of our general, regular majority of grants, they go to these 100 or so standing study sections. Here's what I want you to know about the study sections, and this is good news. In the past, you could look at these different study sections, and it was so easy to be confused, and it's definitely, at least to me, sometimes it's still confusing. I forget if they've changed the name of the neurology study sections, but it used to be neurology A, neurology B, and neurology C. Here you go. All right, well that's enlightening. How do I figure out what's the right one for me? And you could look at the descriptions and still have questions. But the NIH very recently updated and standardized their descriptions. So if you go into this website, you will see a description of the scientific areas that each of these study sections reviews. And it's a bulleted list of specific topic areas. So you can really know which study section is the right home for your grant. And what's really nice is now they have links to the membership roster and the 3 most recent meeting rosters. So you can figure out, who's there. For the most part, they'll always be ad hocs. You'll have a pretty good idea of who's going to sit on that study section. And this can be enormously helpful to you in terms of determining the right study section for you. So beyond the NIH, and I think I've already covered this one about clinicians, so I'm going to skip that one. If you have to revise an application, I talked about the importance of a cover letter. If you revise an application, you must submit a cover letter. And in this cover letter, you want to briefly summarize the review history of the grant. What I mean by that is, this is a first revision of a grant that was originally submitted in February 2009. The title of the grant is such and such. It went to such and such study section. Then you're going to state, I would appreciate it very much if this grant goes back to that same study section, or if you prefer, I would appreciate it very much if this grant were assigned to a different study section, whichever one it may be. But here's what I want you to know about that. 2 things. If you're revising a grant, the title should be the same for the revision. So if it's the grant, you're revising it, don't change the title. It creates endless confusion. It should be the same. New grant, new title. Sometimes when you get that summary statement back, you look at it and you think, oh, if only it had gone to a different study section. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes you look at the summary statement and you think, you know what? It was the wrong study section. They obviously aren't interested in this type of research. They have no use for descriptive research, whatever the issue may be. But in general, if you get a decent review, and I don't mean that they gave you funding, I mean if it seems like a fair and appropriate review, if you get scored, and I'll talk to you about getting scored in a minute, if you got a score, that's great. The grant did reasonably well in the review. In general, there are a million exceptions, but in general, if you revise a grant according to the feedback given in your summary statement, then the chances of getting funded rise exponentially. In general, if you respond to the criticisms, and when I say respond, I don't mean that you say, this criticism makes absolutely no sense. Obviously, anyone with any background in my area would clearly know that this has been disproven a decade ago. No, responding to the study section means that you are going to adopt the vast majority, if not all, of the suggestions that they make. So are you going to roll over and play dead and do every single thing they tell you? You may not do every single thing, but if you want to get funded, you're going to do most of them. So the study section criticized our lack of preliminary data. Therefore, we carried out an additional study to demonstrate our ability to accrue this population. The study section criticized this. This is what we've done to address it. The study section suggested that the grant was too big, that we delete specific aim 3. We've deleted specific aim 3. So a revised application, if done correctly, chances for getting funded just rise hugely. And again, I don't believe the current data are out, but I certainly would be willing to bet at this point that more grants are funded as a first revision than on the original submission. It's so tough. Requesting an institute. So I've already covered this, that the pay lines of the institutes vary. Let's say you get this electronic notification that says, okay, Center for Scientific Review, they've done their job, they've assigned you the grant number, they've assigned you to a study section, they've assigned you to an institute. And you look at it and you think, you know what? I forgot to attach a cover letter, or maybe you attached a cover letter and still went to the wrong study section. Don't just sit there and wait for a negative review. This is the telephone number for the person who heads up the Center for Scientific Review. You call them. Get the grant out of the wrong study section before review. A grant that's in the wrong study section cannot get a positive review. It's got to be reviewed by the right study section. Or you end up like our friend here, this isn't merely a rejection, it's a bloody execution. You must be reviewed by the best study section to understand your particular research. The essence of peer review is carried out by board peers. It's a dual review system, and I want to explain to you the difference between study section and institute, bless you, sometimes called advisory council. Study section reviews scientific merit, and the new emphasis is on impact, which is why I've been talking to you when I talked to you over the last 2 days about always talking about scientific impact, impact on your field, public health impact. The reason I did that is because we know that the NIH is shifting its review criteria in the future. We expect certainly to see these new review criteria, this new modified emphasis, if you will, in the review criteria. And the thing we expect them to look at above all is impact. What is the impact, the likely impact of this research? They're going to rate your application and recommend a level of support, a duration of funding. After they review you, if you're at some of the grants, the top roughly 50% of grants, roughly, goes on to the Institute for consideration of funding. If you're in the lower 50%, you will get a review, but you won't be considered for funding. Okay, so the top 50% goes on to the advisory council or institutes, the same thing. They're going to look at the review of the study session, and then they're going to make funding recommendations based on the review that you got and their priorities. So when I've been talking to you about knowing what the different institutes are interested in, if your research has to do with some type of immune problem, we're going to look at National Institute for Allergy and Immunology and see what their current mission is. What are they emphasizing? And we're going to try, we're certainly not going to change research fields, but we're going to try and use some of the language that they say is their mission, their priorities, and show that our research is in line with their priorities. And that point I made yesterday, I want to repeat today. Very few things that I think all funded grants have in common, but one of them is this. A funded grant, don't care what the funding agency, is written in a way that if you funded me, by funding me, it will help you meet your mission. So I know what your mission is, and I write my grant in a way that will help you meet your mission. Okay? Every funded grant, I think, has that. What happens in peer review? It's managed by your scientific review officer. There are roughly 12 to 24 members, more like 12 these days. It's very hard to get people to sit on the study section. They're appointed for this 4-year term, and they review more than 100 applications per meeting. And again, these aren't NIH employees. These are people whose day job is being a scientist at whatever institution they come from. So this is an additional an additional thing that they do, and they review grants 3 times a year. Every study section has varied expertise, and I really want to pause on this. I use this slide deliberately. You know, we think that people on the study section, all of us, we assume they're just like us. They're just like clones of us. And I use the study section that's looking at surgery right now. I wanted you to see what kinds of backgrounds you're looking at. So this is the study section.